Okay, let's talk about what your radio dial shows, what the front of your radio shows. So the FCC gives us a radio electromagnetic spectrum. That spectrum goes all the way from radio all the way over here to gamma. We in the ham radio normally use the radio portion of it, but it goes a long ways, all the way up to the gamma, X-ray and gamma. So as we get to the FCC amateur radio bands, this is what the FCC, this is what we normally, say 10, 20, 30, 40 meters, 80 meters, 2 meters, that's what people talk about. Well, over here, it goes from the highest frequencies is UHF, VHF, and then it goes all the way from 6 all the way down to 2.2 meters. So we have a lot of spectrum there. So how do we come up with the meter portion of it? Well, we'll talk about that as well. First, let's talk some terms. Kilohertz, or kilohertz, refers to how many thousands of cycle occurs per second. Hertz is one cycle in 1 second. Megahertz refers to millions, megahertz, and kilohertz is 1,000. So 1,000 kilohertz equals 1 megahertz. So when we get there, we'll talk about some shorthand, how we determine shorthand for ham radio. So this is where you get into some math. So let's see if we can pull up my calculator here real quick. Okay, so if we look at the 144 band, 144 megahertz, if we take the 300 of a waveform and we divide that by 144, which is start of the frequency, we're going to get 2.08. Well, we round that up to be 2 meters. That's how we come up with that. And you can come up with that for any other frequencies you want to. So now let's go back here. And we'll go to the next one. We'll say the radio frequency here, 146.220. So this portion, the front number, is the megahertz. And then when you get into here, this is the kilohertz. There's 1,000 kilohertz per megahertz. So in 144 to 148, the 2 meter band, that's 4 megahertz. So there's 1,000 kilohertz in a megahertz. So there's 4,000 kilohertz in there. But we just say it's 2 meters. That's how we come up with it. Alright, so we got simplex and you got duplex. So simplex is just one frequency, a single frequency. There's no plus or minus offset in here. Down here, duplex, you got a minus in there. So what that means is that you're going to use 2 frequencies. You're going to use one to monitor on, which is going to be this one. That's going to be the one you see on your radio dial. But when you press the talk button, or PTT, it'll offset minus. So in this case, it's going to back off. It's going to be 146.280. And so this is what the dial looks like. In this case, you got over here 446, and on a different band, on this particular radio, you have 145. And you can set these bands to whatever you want to, VHF, UHF, on this particular radio. This here shows the main dial. That's the one you can talk on right now. You'll be able to receive on both of them, but this is the one, if you push the talk button, you're going to go out on this one. So you just want to make sure you're on the right one. There's no plus or minus on any of these, so these are what we call simplex frequencies. Alright, again, more of what you'll see. You'll see this in all your manuals. So look at your manual, get familiar with it. Again, this talks about the dial through here. Up here, you'll see the plus and minus if you're using a dual frequency, like a repeater. And this is say you're gonna main channel is this one, or over here, one of those will be open, not both at the same time. Encoded, decoded, if you're using tones, which we'll talk about probably the next video. And then there's some other basic things you see on one. So another example of a radio frequency here. On this case, the A band is up top, B band is at the bottom. Again, you don't see a plus or minus on these. So these are simplex. This just represents it's capturing satellites, so you can use APRS, and in this case, you can program this radial or capture pictures on a sound card or an SD card. All right, that does it for this video. I hope it's enlightened you a little bit more. Stay tuned for our next video, which will probably be on tones for the radios.